The Great Filter, why we haven't found aliens, and why that's terrifying. You know how the universe is supposed to be buzzing with life? So why is the sky so quiet you can hear the static? This is the Fermi Paradox. With so many stars and planets, we should see someone, yet we don't. The Great Filter is the brutal idea that either the hardest step is behind us, or it's waiting ahead. There's one discovery that would scare astronomers more than any alien signal. I'll get to that. I'll walk the numbers, test the leading filter candidates, and end with what we can actually do about it. To see why silence matters, start with the numbers. The scale problem. Why we expected neighbors. Okay, so basically the expectation starts with a checklist, not a prophecy. That checklist is the Drake equation. It asks, how many stars form? How many have planets? How many of those have habitable zones? How often life starts? How often it gets smart? How often it builds radios, and how long those radios stay on. It's not a prediction machine. It's a way to structure our uncertainty. Here's what most people miss. Even with cautious numbers, you still expect some noise. Think of the exoplanet story. Kepler and TESS showed that planets are common, not special. Many stars host multiple worlds, and a decent fraction sit in temperate zones where liquid water could exist. We're not talking exact counts. We're talking orders of magnitude. If you have hundreds of billions of stars in the Milky Way, even a tiny percentage with Earth-like planets leaves you with millions of targets. Now combine that with time. Our galaxy is more than 10 billion years old. Civilizations don't need to be fast or flashy to fill space. Slow ships, generation arcs, tiny self-replicating probes cruising at a few percent of light speed could still sweep the galaxy in a few tens of millions of years. That's a blink on galactic timescales. In other words, if someone started early, even cautiously, they'd have had time. Here's the weird part. We've been looking, at least in some ways. Radio SETI has listened for narrowband, artificial-like tones. Optical searches have scanned for brief laser pulses brighter than a star for a split second. Infrared surveys have checked for waste heat, because if you build big, you glow. These are technosignatures, things a technological species might inadvertently leak or deliberately broadcast. Nobody explains this right, but you don't need shouting civilizations to notice something. You need one detectable artifact, one repeating signal, one star with a suspicious excess of mid-infrared light that screams industry. We've had candidates and false alarms, but nothing that holds up. The silence isn't absolute. We barely touched a sliver of parameter space, but it's stubborn. Everything clicked when I realized how anthropic bias trips us up. We exist, so of course we observe a universe where at least one planet produced observers. That can make life feel common even if it's rare. Our single data point can't tell us how typical Earth is. If abiogenesis is easy, lots of biospheres should exist. If it's hard, we might be a fluke staring out from a lucky rock. This might seem backwards, but the timescale cuts both ways. On Earth, life showed up fast after oceans formed, within a few 100 million years. That hints it could be easy, yet complex life took billions of years to appear. Intelligence and technology, that's the last instant of the last second on the cosmic clock. So does the speed of life start matter more, or the long stall before complexity? Let's talk colonization logic for a second. Imagine even a cautious civilization launches self-replicating probes, machines that mine asteroids, copy themselves, and spread to the next star. They don't need megastructures. They just need patience, repairability, and simple rules. Over tens of millions of years, that wave would lace the galaxy with quiet infrastructure. We might see unusual asteroid distributions, engineered orbits, or subtle spectra. Again, one piece of undeniable weirdness would break the silence. The counterintuitive part is that technosignatures are both easier and harder than you think. Easier because powerful radios and lasers stand out against natural backgrounds. Harder because the sky is vast and variable, and signals can be narrow, intermittent, or aimed elsewhere. Waste heat is enticing because physics forces you to dump energy. But efficient civilizations could keep heat low and local, blending into cosmic dust. So why did we expect neighbors? Because scale, time, and basic engineering suggest at least a few should be visible. Because the Milky Way is old enough that modest expansion strategies would already leave footprints. Because our instruments, imperfect as they are, should have tripped over a smoking gun by now if loud civilizations were common. In other words, even conservative estimates say the stage should be crowded. If it isn't, the silence needs a because. That's where the great filter comes in, a step so unlikely, most lines of life never pass it. The scary fork is whether that step is behind us, which would make us precious, or ahead of us, which would make survival the exception. Remember this detail. One nearby discovery could swing the odds hard. We'll come back to that. The great filter, the core idea in plain English. Okay, so basically, the great filter is the idea that along the path from dead rock to galaxy-spanning civilization, there's at least one step that's insanely unlikely. Not just hard, brutally improbable. If most worlds try, almost all of them fail at that step. That's how you reconcile so many planets with so little noise. Think of the path as a chain. Start with a stable planet, liquid water, chemistry that births self-replicating molecules, cells, complex cells, multicellular organisms, intelligence with language, technology, and then durable, expansion-capable societies. You can sprinkle more links in, but the point is the same. One link is the choke point that throttles the odds. If any step is astronomically rare, the whole chain becomes rare. Here's what most people miss. You don't need every step to be hard. One impossible round in a tournament eliminates almost everyone. If 10,000 teams enter and one round has a 1 in a million success rate, you're not seeing a final match. The great filter is that one impossible round. Everything else could be messy, but doable. Now the scary fork. Is the filter behind us or ahead of us? If it's behind us, then something early, like life starting at all, or the leap to complex cells, almost never happens. That would make us the lucky winners who already passed the impossible round. The silence out there would mean most planets never got past that early hurdle. In that world, the future could be wide open if we don't trip ourselves. But if the filter is ahead of us, the quiet sky is a warning. It says, many worlds might reach our stage, build radios, dabble with industry, and then hit a trap. Self-destruction, unmanageable technologies, resource spirals, or physics walls that make interstellar expansion practically unworkable. In that world, the hardest round hasn't started yet. Our current century could be the qualifying match. Everything clicked when I realized we can treat this like a detective problem. We have 3 kinds of evidence to test candidates: Earth's history, the wider sky, and probability logic. Earth's history tells us which steps took forever and which seemed quick. The sky tells us how common, loud, or wasteful civilizations are. Probability logic keeps us honest about bias. Our single data point can mislead us. Here's the weird part. Some steps look fast on Earth. Life showed up quickly after conditions stabilized, which hints it could be easy. But complex cells took billions of years, which hints that something about that transition is rare or slow. Intelligence and cumulative culture, late and fragile. These timing clues point to potential choke points, but none of them prove which round is impossible. In other words, we'll score each step by 3 questions. Why would this be the filter? What would the universe look like if it were? And how do current observations fit that picture? That's our test. If abiogenesis is the filter, we should find dead biospheres everywhere, worlds with the right chemistry but no life. If the leap to complex cells is the filter, simple biosignatures might be common, while technosignatures are nearly absent. If self-destruction is the filter, we'd expect rare beacons, short-lived transmissions, and a lot of civilizations that never leave obvious, durable artifacts. Think of it like checking footprints in snow. If you expect a parade and you see one set of tracks, either almost nobody left the house or they stepped onto a trapdoor right outside the door. Past versus future filter changes how you read those tracks and how you plan your next step. The practical takeaway is simple. We'll walk the chain from the earliest chemistry to the hazards of expansion. For each candidate, we'll weigh Earth's timeline, the sky's silence, and the predictions each filter makes. And remember the open loop. There's one discovery nearby that would shove the filter forward in time and make the future riskier. Keep that in mind as we start at the beginning, life itself. Filter candidate 1, abiogenesis, is nearly impossible. Start at the beginning, life from non-life. If abiogenesis is nearly impossible, the whole paradox softens. 1 billion habitable worlds could sit sterile, and our noisy expectations collapse. Why it matters is simple. If the first spark almost never happens, then the great filter is behind us. We're rare by default, and the silence is just statistics doing their thing. What do we actually know? Early Earth cooled, oceans formed, and within a few 100 million years, there's evidence of life. Carbon isotope ratios hinting at metabolism around 3.7 to 3.8. Billion years ago, stromatolite-like structures not long after. Chemically, we have plausible precursors, nucleotides, amino acids, lipids, and the self-assembly tricks they play. The RNA world hypothesis suggests a time when RNA did both data storage and catalysis. Lab work shows ribozymes can copy short stretches and catalyze reactions, and lipid vesicles can form spontaneously, encapsulating molecules into protocells. Hydrothermal vents offer gradients, metals, and energy flows. Alkaline vents provide natural proton gradients, handy batteries for early metabolism. Here's the weird part. The speed of life's appearance on Earth can mean two opposite things. One reading says easy, like condensation on a cold glass. Once the conditions show up, life condenses fast. Another reading says selection bias. We could only exist on a world where life arose early enough to allow billions of years for evolution to produce observers. If abiogenesis usually takes 10 billion years, we wouldn't be here to notice because our star won't last that long. So of course, we find ourselves on a rare early success world. That's anthropic reasoning in action. Everything clicked when I looked at timescale puzzles. Early life appears quickly, yes, but life can also find many microhabitats. Ponds cycling dry/wet phases, shorelines with UV chemistry, vents with redox gradients. Each microenvironment rolls chemical dice. If a single planet offers trillions of experiments over millions of years, quick emergence could still be consistent with rarity at the galactic scale. The numerator might be big on one planet. The denominator, worlds where conditions endure, might be huge and mostly empty. So what's the core explanation? Abiogenesis might require a very specific sequence. Right monomers, right concentration cycles, mineral surfaces for templating, a quirky set of ribozyme folds, and environmental rhythms that don't just build molecules but lock in heredity and error-correcting replication. In other words, not soup cell, but soup, proto-metabolism, compartmentalization, replicators that can evolve without any step breaking the chain. The simple version is, a lot has to go right, in order, under fluctuating, but not catastrophic conditions. Think of it like a safe with multiple dials. Each dial is a chemical constraint. Purity, chirality, spontaneous assembly, information stability, energy coupling. You can get a few dials aligned by chance. Getting them all aligned and then hitting go before the environment resets might be insanely unlikely. Yet given enough attempts on one lucky planet, it can still happen once. Make it stick with a micro story. I once watched a lab team try to coax ribozymes to copy longer strands. Everything was fussy. Magnesium helped catalysis, but also chewed up the RNA. Temperatures that promoted base pairing slowed the reactions. They'd celebrate a few extra nucleotides like a marathon win. Now shift to deep-sea vents. Minerals acting as catalysts, constant energy gradients, micropores acting like natural reactors. The environment might have tuned the dials in ways our benchtop can't yet reproduce. But the point stands. This isn't plug-and-play chemistry. Counterpoint. We have one planet and one timeline. A single early success can't pin a probability. If you flip a coin once and see heads, you can't conclude it's biased. That's why Mars, Europa, and Enceladus matter. If we find a second Genesis, life unrelated to us with different biochemistry, right next door, the Abiogenesis is nearly impossible story collapses. Two origins in one solar system would scream common. Conversely, decades of searching with no independent life anywhere locally would nudge us toward rarity. What would the universe look like if abiogenesis is the filter? Dead but promising worlds. Plenty of rocky planets with water, atmospheres, and the right temperatures, but no biosignatures, no methane-oxygen imbalances, no distinctive pigments, no global chemical fingerprints of metabolism. That predicts that as we scan exoplanet atmospheres, we'll see far fewer biosignatures than naive optimism suggests. Technosignatures would be vanishingly rare because almost no planet ever gets to step one. How do current observations fit? We found the hardware, planets, habitable zones, long-lived stars. We haven't yet found definitive biosignatures. That's not surprising given today's instruments, but it's consistent with both rare life and we're early in the search. The key is what happens as JWST, ELSE, and future missions stack spectra. If a decade from now we're still empty-handed for biosignatures across hundreds of decent targets, abiogenesis as filter gains weight. Here's what most people miss. This candidate both comforts and alarms. Comforts, because if the filter's behind us, we may have runway. Alarms, because it means we're alone enough that no one's coming to save us if we stumble. And remember the open loop, the scariest. Discovery might be microbial life nearby. That's clearly unrelated to Earth's tree. That would shrink the abiogenesis is impossible option and shove the great filter toward our future. For now, we hold two pictures in mind. Chemistry that usually fizzles and chemistry that often lights, but only once per system. Filter candidate 2, the leap to complex cells, eukaryotes. But life's start isn't the same as life getting interesting. For almost 2 billion years, Earth was a microbial planet, tiny cells doing chemistry and slowly pumping oxygen. Then something bizarre happened. Cells within cells. That's the leap to eukaryotes, and it's weird enough to be a great filter. Okay, so basically, eukaryotes are cells with internal compartments and a power plant, mitochondria. The leading story is endosymbiosis. An archaeal host swallowed a bacterium, didn't digest it, and the two struck a permanent energy deal. Over time, that bacterium shrank into a mitochondrion. That merger isn't just housekeeping, it's an energetic revolution. With mitochondria, cells get far more usable energy per gene. More energy means bigger genomes, complex regulation, cytoskeletons, sex, and the ability to build multicellular bodies later. In other words, mitochondria bankroll complexity. Here's what most people miss. Prokaryotes, bacteria and archaea, are stunningly capable, but they're energy limited at scale. Each gene in a big prokaryote costs too much energy to maintain and express. Eukaryotes outsource energy to many little power units, each with its own membrane and high membrane area. That gives an energy per gene boost by orders of magnitude. The simple version is, with mitochondria, you can afford complexity. Everything clicked when I looked at the timeline. Life appeared early, but eukaryotes show up much later, roughly 1.6 to 2.1 billion years ago, depending on the fossil and molecular clock you trust. Then complex multicellular life blooms only after oxygen rises, and eukaryotes diversify. That long stall suggests either the merger is rare or the environment needed to be just so: stable oxygen levels, trace metals, and enough ecological room for big cells to pay off. Why might this step be the filter? Because endosymbiosis at that depth might require an extremely specific encounter. The right archaeal lineage with cytoskeletal quirks and membrane properties. The right bacterium with the metabolic machinery that can be co-opted, and a way to keep the peace. Most engulfed bacteria get digested. Most intruders trigger defense. You need a truce that becomes a treaty, then a marriage, then a fused identity where genes transfer from the bacterium to the host nucleus without killing the partnership. That's not just rare. It's a needle in a stack of needles problem. But the counterpoint is strong. Symbiosis is everywhere. Corals and algae, ruminants and gut microbes, leafcutter ants and fungus. Even within cells, there are plastids from a second endosymbiotic event that gave plants chloroplasts. So is deep endosymbiosis actually rare? The thing is, plastids seem to derive from one primary event too, then spread by secondary captures. The pattern might be one lucky breakthrough, then lots of borrowing. That still screams rarity at the origin point. Let's talk evidence lines. Genomic clocks suggest a single ancestral eukaryotic lineage with mitochondria early. No clear cases of independent mitochondria evolving twice. Mitochondrial genes are heavily transferred to the nucleus in eukaryotes, and mitochondria kept a tiny genome, like a stripped-down operating system focused on respiration. That consistent architecture hints at a singular founding event rather than many parallel inventions. Bioenergetics math backs it. Eukaryotic cells have orders of magnitude more internal respiratory membrane than prokaryotes can manage with their outer surface, giving them the energy budget for big, complex genomes. Here's the weird part. You can evolve lots of clever tricks without jumping to eukaryote-level complexity. Prokaryotes have crisper immune systems, metabolic wizardry, and crazy environmental resilience. But after billions of years, none built large, genome-heavy bodies with compartmentalized traffic and mitosis the way eukaryotes did. That asymmetry is a clue.
Make it stick with a micro story. Picture two startups. One bootstraps from revenue and stays small because every new employee costs too much overhead. The other lands a massive investor, the Mitochondrian. Suddenly they can hire specialists, open new departments, and build R&D pipelines. The first startup can be profitable and everywhere. The second builds skyscrapers. Earth had bootstrappers for eons. The skyscrapers show up after the investor. What would the universe look like if this is the filter? Biosignatures might be common. Lots of planets with microbial mats, methane whispers, maybe oxygen from photosynthesis. But complex animal-like life would be exceptionally rare.
Technosignatures would be almost absent because you need big brains and hands, and those require the energetic surplus and developmental complexity that eukaryotes enable. This predicts a cosmos with many living worlds that never invent telescopes. How do current observations fit? We haven't confirmed any biosignatures yet, but soon we'll sniff exoplanet atmospheres for oxygen methane disequilibria and other metabolic fingerprints. If we find lots of microbial-style signals but never see signs of industrial activity, no strange atmospheric pollutants, no artificial nightlights, no waste heat excess, that pattern would lean toward eukaryote leap is rare. On Earth, the late arrival of eukaryotes and the single origin feel of mitochondria support the rarity view, but they don't prove it. The counterintuitive part is oxygen. The Great Oxidation Event created opportunity, but also stress. Oxygen is reactive and dangerous to cells. Some argue you needed a long geochemical dance to set stable oxygen levels, and the merger then took off. If so, the filter might be planetary oxygenation regimes rather than the merger itself. But either way, it points to a narrow window. Specific hosts, specific partners, and a planet that holds still long enough. In other words, if the leap to complex cells is the choke point, the galaxy could be alive, but mostly quiet. Lots of ponds, few cities, and that sets up our next step neatly. Even with eukaryotes, you don't automatically get bodies. Multicellularity is its own gamble with its own traps. Filter Candidate 3, Multicellularity and Animal-Level Complexity. Complex cells don't guarantee bodies. For more than 1 billion years after eukaryotes appeared, Earth still looked like a microbial planet. Multicellularity is the next bet. Cells agreeing to stick together, specialize, and not cheat. That sounds simple. It's not. You're asking individual cells to give up autonomy, share resources, and follow developmental rules that only pay off later. Evolution doesn't hand out trust easily. Here's what most people miss. Multicellularity evolved many times. Algae did it, fungi did it, plants did it. Even some bacteria form cooperative filaments. That makes it look easy, but most versions are minimal, clumps, films, or simple bodies with limited specialization. The jump to complex animals, circulatory systems, nervous systems, patterned tissues, fast movement appears far rarer. So yes, groups of cells are common. Intricate, tool-capable bodies are another league. Okay, so basically, you need 3 ingredients. First, a developmental toolkit. Genes and switches that tell cells when to divide, where to go, and what to become. Second, environmental oxygen and nutrients to power bigger structures. Third, policing mechanisms, ways to suppress cheaters, cells that multiply selfishly instead of serving the organism. Cancer is the reminder that cooperation is conditional. Complex life invented layers of security to keep the coalition intact. Everything clicked when I learned about Hox genes and their friends. These are like positional barcodes along the body axis. Change the code, change the layout, more segments, different limbs, new head shapes. They don't build the parts, they schedule the construction crew. Once you've got a modular plan and a way to tweak it, evolution can iterate like crazy. That's why body plans diversify rapidly when the toolkit matures. Let's deflate a myth. The Cambrian explosion wasn't a magic spark from nowhere. It was a drawn-out ramp-up fed by earlier innovations. Oxygen creeping higher, predation arms races, biomineralization for shells and spines, and improved developmental control. The fossil record looks like a sudden burst, partly because soft-bodied ancestors don't preserve well and because threshold effects compound. But the key point is the same. Complex animal ecosystems took time and multiple enabling conditions. Why might multicellularity be the filter? Because coordinated specialization is brittle. You need adhesion proteins, so cells stick but don't fuse into mush. You need signaling gradients,
so tissues pattern without noise. You need apoptosis, programmed cell death, so sculpting works and rogue cells get eliminated. You need germline soma separation, so mutation risks are buffered. Each layer adds failure modes. The more parts you add, the more chances the plan falls apart before selection can stabilize it. Here's the weird part. Oxygen rises can be both gate and hazard. Too little oxygen, and large active bodies can't power muscles or brains. Too much, and you get oxidative stress that damages biomolecules. Earth's oxygenation came in fits and starts, with whiffs before stable highs. If most planets don't hit the right oxygen plateau at the right time, complex animals might stall. Some could stay microbial for eons, even with eukaryotes waiting in the wings. Make it stick with a micro story. A lab friend grew simple multicellular algae by selecting for fast settling clusters. In a few weeks, clumps evolved. But getting differentiated cell types, some permanently sterile, some structural, didn't appear. Selection can make a team quickly. Building a company with departments, HR, and long-term strategy is harder. Nature did the company version, and only after millions of tries. So what would the universe look like if this is the filter? Many biospheres with microbial mats and maybe photosynthetic pigments visible from space. Occasional worlds with plants or plant analogs, stationary, energy-harvesting multicells. Far fewer with active animal analogs, predators, circulatory systems, fast nerves. Fewer still with dexterous manipulators and long childhoods that support culture. That predicts detectable biosignatures might be moderately common, but ecosystems that generate sustained technological species are rare. How do current observations fit? We don't have exoecology yet, but we can set expectations. If future telescopes see oxygen-methane disequilibria often, plus seasonal color changes from vegetation-like pigments, but never industrial pollutants or artificial night-side light curves, that would lean toward multicellular animals are scarce. If instead we find multiple worlds with complex atmospheric cycles hinting at large, metabolically intense organisms, that weakens this candidate. The counterintuitive part is extinction as a gate, not a guarantee. Mass extinctions clear ecological space and reset arms races, but they don't write new toolkits. If developmental.
Control and oxygen haven't crossed thresholds. Wiping the slate doesn't conjure complexity. It just shuffles microbes. Snowball Earth events might have delayed animals until after eukaryotes refined stress responses and energy budgets. In other words, catastrophe can be a ladder only when the rungs are already there. In other words, if multicellularity and animal-level complexity are the choke point, the galaxy could host many living worlds that never build cities. You get forests without engineers, reefs without radios. The silence would make sense. Minds with machines require a very specific stack. Toolkits, oxygen windows, cooperation policing that may rarely align. And even if they do, brains add a new kind of risk and promise. That's where intelligence and all its costs enters the story. Filter candidate 4, intelligence, language, and culture. Brains add promise and bills to pay. General intelligence is expensive. It eats calories, grows slowly, and needs long childhoods where caregivers invest instead of forage. Evolution usually takes the cheap win. If simple strategies work, camouflage, venom, symbiosis, why build a metabolic furnace that demands 20% of your energy while you sleep? Okay, so basically, intelligence only pays if the environment rewards flexible problem solving more than specialized hardware. Octopuses solve puzzles, crows make hooks, dolphins coordinate hunts. But most species thrive without open-ended reasoning. A beaver's dam works fine without calculus. The simple version is, niches favor competence, not curiosity. Big brains are rare because most ecosystems don't select for them. Here's what most people miss. Intelligence isn't one trait. It's memory, abstraction, causal modeling, social inference, planning, and meta-learning. Those pieces don't assemble automatically. They need the right body plan for manipulation, sensory systems with bandwidth and social structures that make information valuable. You can have clever predators forever and never cross into cumulative culture. Everything clicked when I learned the cultural Ratchet idea. One mind solves a problem, another copies it, a third tweaks it, and the improved version becomes the new baseline. Over generations, the Ratchet turns one way, stacking know-how higher than any single brain could invent from scratch. Chimps and crows show small ratchets, regional tool traditions, but they stall. Human language turns the Ratchet into a gearbox. Why language? Because it compresses experience. Words let you transmit high-fidelity recipes for action, not just vibes. With syntax, you can nest ideas, chain contingencies, and explain the invisible: causes, norms, gods, germs. Teaching jumps from showing to telling. Apprenticeship scales. Knowledge stops resetting at each birth. The counterintuitive part is that language might need population size and connectivity to sustain. If groups are small or isolated, innovations die in the gaps. Archaeology hints at bursts of complexity when networks link. Trade beads, pigment recipes, blade styles spreading across regions. Social webs are cognitive exoskeletons. They hold ideas when individuals forget. Now the costs. Intelligence needs time. Long juvenility asks for food security and protection, which demands cooperation. Cooperation invites freeloading and conflict, which demands norms, punishment, and trust tech. Customs, rituals, later laws. You get feedback loops. Smarter groups coordinate better, which supports bigger groups, which create more opportunities for innovation and more risk of large-scale failure. Let's talk manipulators. Tinkering minds need hands, or their equivalent. Fine motor control plus stereoscopic vision plus a flexible wrist is a rare combo. Parrots have beaks and feet, but no fire. Dolphins are smart, but live in a wet lab where combustion fails. Even with brains, many bodies hit a ceiling. No controlled heat, no metallurgy, no microchips. Make it stick with a microstory. A field team once watched capuchin monkeys crack nuts with stones. Some individuals were virtuosos, others copied badly and gave up. No one wrote the technique down. A storm wiped out the best stones, and the local tradition degraded for a season. Now imagine the same scene with a campfire and spoken instruction. Use this angle. Heat the stone first. Here's why. That's the Ratchet difference. What would the universe look like if intelligence plus culture is the filter? Plenty of complex ecologies, some with animals as capable as octopuses or corvids. Few, if any, cross the chasm to cumulative technology. Controlled fire, ceramics, metals, engines, computation. You'd expect biosignatures and maybe seasonal vegetation spectra, but almost no technosignatures. On the rare worlds where language, hands, and social scaffolding align, tech could ignite, briefly or brilliantly. How do current observations fit? The sky's quiet aligns with this filter. Complex life might exist, yet almost never develop radio. Earth's late. Surge. Millions of years of clever animals, then a sudden cultural takeoff. Hints that the cultural ratchet is a fragile threshold, not an inevitability. Our primate lineage wandered for ages with decent brains and simple tools before symbolic language and teaching scaled. Here's the weird part. Intelligence increases existential risk. The same generality that hacks problems hacks the substrate we depend on. Ecosystems, climate, pathogens, AI. Culture accelerates both solutions and hazards. If many worlds spark smart apes, but only a sliver stabilizes the ratchet without burning down the lab, the silence makes sense. In other words, this candidate says minds are common enough, civilizations are not. To beat the odds, you need a stack. Manipulators, language with syntax, large connected populations, surplus to fund specialists, and norms that dampen internal conflict while preserving open inquiry. Miss one layer, and the ratchet slips. Hit them all, and you've built a launch pad and a fuse. Filter candidate 5, self-destruction before leaving home. Tech growth meets its most dangerous stage when we gain global power without global wisdom. The adolescent civilization window is where capabilities compound faster than coordination. If this is the great filter, then many worlds reach our level. Industry, radio, early networks, and then vanish locally before leaving durable marks. Okay, so basically, stacked vulnerabilities make a fragile system. Start with nuclear risk. We built devices that compress centuries of warfare into minutes. History already gave us near misses. Malfunctioning satellites misread sunlight glints as missiles. Radar ghosts look like launches. One officer's judgment stood between noise and Armageddon in the 1980s. The lesson isn't ancient. Any system with hair-trigger incentives and opaque data is primed for cascade failure under stress. Engineered pandemics raise a different edge. Biotechnology is democratizing fast. Cheaper DNA synthesis, CRISPR toolkits, labs that fit on a desk. Most researchers aim to cure disease. But dual-use risk is real. A small team could modify a pathogen's transmissibility, immune evasion, or stability.
The scary part is feedback. Global travel in dense cities amplifies spread. Social media amplifies panic and rumor. Panic degrades response effectiveness. The window between detection and containment shrinks as tools get faster. Climate instability is slower but relentless. Civilization tuned itself to a stable Holocene climate. Push it hard and you get compounding disruptions. Heat waves that hit power grids and crops at once. Fire seasons that overlap. Floods that knock out industrial hubs. It's not one catastrophe, it's correlated failures. Supply chains are long and brittle. A shock in one node propagates. Systems thinking says when coupling increases, local failures spread non-linearly. Here's the weird part. Even positive-sounding trends can raise risk. Automation makes systems efficient, but efficiency strips slack, the buffer you need when rare events hit. Financialization optimizes returns, but optimization reduces redundancy. Information tech connects us, but hyper-connected networks synchronize errors. A civilization can look robust while quietly losing its margin for error. The great filter might be the vanishing of slack. Everything clicked when I mapped capability versus control. Artificial intelligence is the cleanest example. Capability scales fast with compute, data, and algorithmic insights. Control, alignment, interpretability, robust objectives, lags. You get systems that perform superhumanly in narrow tasks and act unpredictably under distribution shift. If future AI runs critical infrastructure, finance, or biodesign, misspecified goals become physical outcomes. The risk isn't evil robots, it's competent systems optimizing the wrong thing at machine speed. Resource overshoot adds pressure. Extractive growth can run ahead of renewal rates. If political incentives reward short-term gains and punish restraint, you get what ecologists call tragedies of the commons. Replace a forest with a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet wins until the underlying capacity collapses. Overshoot doesn't need total depletion. It only needs tipping points that degrade complexity. Lost soils, collapsed fisheries, eroded trust. Now the politics. Global coordination is a trust game under uncertainty. Players with different risk tolerances and timelines face asymmetric payoffs. If you believe your rival might defect, you arm. If everyone arms, the risk of miscalculation rises. Deterrence works until sensors fail or leaders misread signals. The Cold War's hair-raising episodes are previews, not relics. A flock of geese became incoming bombers. A training tape looked like a real attack. An officer named Stanislav Petrov chose to wait. Thin margins saved us. Make it stick with a micro-story. In 1979, a U.S. training tape was mistakenly loaded into NORAD's live system, flashing up
Massive Soviet launch on screens. Fighters scrambled, command posts lit up. Within minutes, cross-checks showed nothing on radar. It was a simulation ghost. In 1983, Soviet early warning satellites falsely indicated incoming U.S. missiles. Officer Stanislav Petrov judged it a false alarm and did not escalate. Swap those ghosts for an AI-augmented detection network under cyber attack during a geopolitical crisis. The clock ticks faster, the human loop shrinks. That's the adolescent window. What would the universe look like if this is the filter? You get lots of civilizations lighting up briefly. Radio leakage for a century or two. Occasional megawatt transmitters. Maybe a few probes launched, a moon base, an asteroid mine. Then silence. Artifacts would be local and fleeting. Planetary atmospheres might show industrial pollutants for a blink, then a reversion toward baseline over centuries. The sky would look like ours: hints, false alarms, no repeaters that last. How do current observations fit? The lack of loud, continuous beacons fits short-lived tech phases. Repeated non-detections in radio SETI, despite growing sensitivity, suggest that if signals exist, they're narrow, intermittent, or brief in cosmic terms. Waste heat searches haven't found galaxy-scale power users. If most civilizations self-limit or self-destruct before megastructures, the infrared sky stays boring. Here's the counterintuitive part. Self-destruction doesn't require malice. It can emerge from aligned incentives at small scales that misalign at large scales. A lab optimizes publishable results. A company optimizes quarterly metrics. A government optimizes election cycles. The planetary sum is misoptimization. Complexity without governance is a loaded die. So is this the great filter? It could be. The adolescent window aggregates diverse risks into one mechanism: capability outpacing coordination. But being a filter doesn't mean inevitability. Engineering disciplines know how to buy down risk.
redundancy, fail-safes, audits, simulators, emergency drills, and clear ownership of failure modes. Nuclear safety evolved from near misses. Aviation learned from black boxes. Biolabs learn from tiered containment. AI can learn from all of them if we move before the curve steepens. Okay, what will we predict if civilizations survived this filter? We'd see fewer loud broadcasts, more deliberate, quiet, robust, cautious expansion after safety cultures mature. That sets up our next question. What if physics and strategy make going interstellar hard even after you survive your own adolescence? If the universe has a bouncer at the door, the silence could persist, even with grown-ups in the room. Filter candidate 6, hard physics limits on expansion. What if physics itself is the bouncer at the door? Even if civilizations survive adolescence, interstellar expansion might be brutally constrained by energy costs, engineering mortality, and strategy. That wouldn't mean nobody's out there. It would mean they're quiet, sparse, and careful. Okay, so basically, space is hostile and big in a boring way. Crossing it demands energy that scales harshly with speed. Push to 10% of light speed and kinetic energy per kilogram explodes. Think nuclear bomb equivalents per ton. Double the speed and the energy quadruples. That's before you pay for shielding, guidance, and the fuel to slow down at the destination. The simple version is, going fast is expensive. Going slow is survivable, but takes forever on human timescales. Here's what most people miss. Interstellar dust is not confetti. At point C, a millimeter grain hits like an anti-tank round. Shielding must be thick, self-healing, and constantly repaired. That adds mass, which adds energy needs, which adds more mass for fuel or power systems. A spiral. Smart designs use Whipple shields, magnetic fields to deflect charged particles, and sacrificial layers that ablate while robots replace them. But the engineering mortality rate grows with distance and time. More micrometeoroids, more fatigue, more software drift, more tiny faults that compound without maintenance. Everything clicked when I thought about maintenance chains. A ship that can repair itself is a factory, not a car. It needs raw materials, machining, quality control, and redundancy for the repair systems themselves. Self-replicating probes reduce the launch cost, but now you need error correction across generations. Mutation in hardware, tiny fabrication imperfections, accumulates like biological drift. Without robust standards and occasional genetic resets, lineages can degrade or diverge into behaviors you didn't intend. Energy architecture is another bind. Fusion is promising, but practical fusion rockets are still theory plus hard engineering. Antimatter is a storage fantasy at scale today. Beamed propulsion, lasers or microwaves pushing light sails, moves the energy source off the vehicle. But that demands planet-sized apertures and razor-precise pointing.
Over light years. Miss the beam and your ship coasts cold. Hit dust and your sail tears. Every option has trade-offs between capital intensity, reliability, and speed. The counterintuitive part is that slower might be smarter. At 1% of light speed, dust damage drops by orders of magnitude, energy falls by a factor of 100, and you can pack more redundancy. A wave of probes creeping at. 01C still crosses the galaxy in a few 100 million years. Long for us, short for the Milky Way. If expansion happens, it may be glacial, local, and almost invisible from far away. Now layer strategy. The dark forest idea says broadcasting is risky in a game with unknown players and unknown motives. If detection equals vulnerability, the optimal policy is radio silence, passive sensing, and encryption. Even if most players are benign, asymmetric threats, rogue AIs, self-replicators with bugs, create incentives to stay quiet and small. Civilization might optimize for survival probability, not spectacle. That means no big beacons, no galaxy-scale neon signs, and cautious expansion limited to spheres you can monitor and control. Cosmic hazards add pressure. Gamma-ray bursts and nearby supernovae can sterilize or at least stress biospheres regionally. Active galactic nuclei flare. Passing through dense molecular clouds can alter comet fluxes and climate. A patient civilization could route around danger zones, but hazards carve time windows, expand during quiet epochs, hunker during noisy ones. That produces patchy growth, not uniform frontiers. What will we predict if hard limits dominate, quiet skies even with survivors, few if any galaxy-spanning empires? Instead, distributed archipelagos, clusters of systems developed to high efficiency, linked by narrow, secure corridors. Tech focus shifts inward.
computation density, reversible computing, error-corrected logic, and heat management. Waste heat becomes the telltale, but super-efficient systems run cool, radiating at long wavelengths that blend with dust and cold clouds. Megastructures might exist, but as thin, optimized collectors, not cartoonish solid spheres. Make it stick with a micro-story. A team designs a probe with onboard fabrication. First generation works. Second gen copies slightly misaligned bearings, tiny increase in friction. 10th gen runs hotter, software adjusts but thermal margins shrink. A micrometeoroid pings the radiator, and degradation accelerates. Without occasional uploads of golden blueprints and audits, the lineage drifts. Scale that to 1,000,000 years. Survival becomes an exercise in metrology, standards, and vigilance, not just thrust. Here's the weird part. If expansion is hard, megastructures should still glow, right? Not necessarily. You can route energy into computation and radiate close to the cosmic microwave background with huge radiators, making detection tough. You can bury industry inside dust-rich regions, trading visibility for raw materials. You can canalize heat into directed beams. You only open when friendly receivers acknowledge. From our vantage, that looks like nature. How do current observations fit? Infrared sky surveys haven't found unambiguous Dyson-scale waste heat at galaxy scales. That's consistent with either absence or efficiency. Radio and laser searches haven't caught bright, repeating beacons, which fits a quietist strategy. We've also not seen obvious self-replicator footprints, no bizarre asteroid distributions we can't explain, though our surveys of small bodies are shallow beyond our neighborhood and current catalogs are incomplete. In other words, hard physics plus cautious strategy can keep the galaxy looking empty, even if it isn't. Expansion may be possible, but unattractive, until safety cultures and control tech are ironclad. Survivors pick slow, secure, and subtle over fast, flashy, and fragile. And that leads to a brutal implication. Our non-detections don't prove absence. They might be exactly what success looks like.
The Techno-signature audit, what we've actually checked. Non-detections narrow possibilities, but only if we're clear about what we've actually looked for. Okay, so basically, Techno-signatures are the byproducts or beacons of technology. Deliberate signals, industrial waste, engineered light, or suspicious heat. We've sampled all four, lightly. Start with radio. Classic SETI listens for narrowband, artificial-sounding tones. Signals so spectrally sharp that nature almost never produces them. Projects like the Allen Telescope Array and Breakthrough Listen have scanned billions of frequency channel, target combinations. Here's what most people miss. Billions sounds huge, but the search space is monstrous. Frequency is one axis. Time is another. Signals can flicker. Sky position and polarization add more. Modulation schemes add still more. We've done deep looks at a tiny fraction and shallow looks at a wider fraction. We found candidates, odd pings that popped once, but follow-up killed them. Local interference, satellites, earthshine from radar. When you chase, they vanish. The simple version is, no confirmed repeaters yet. Everything clicked when I looked at dwell time. If an extraterrestrial lighthouse sweeps past our line of sight for 5 minutes every 12 days, and we stare at that star for 2 minutes once a year, we miss it forever. Narrowband and intermittent signals are cheap for them and costly for us to catch. That's why you see new strategies, multi-beam arrays that watch many targets at once, and algorithms that hunt for drift from Doppler shifts as planets rotate. Optical technosignatures sound exotic, but are simple. Lasers. A nanosecond pulse brighter than a star for an eye blink stands out in a spectrograph. Surveys have scanned nearby stars for these optical and near-infrared flashes. Results so far? No verified artificial pulses, but again, small slices. You need fast detectors, broad wavelength coverage, and repeated visits, because a civilization that pings once a week won't coincide with our Tuesday night look. The upside is sensitivity. A powerful laser can beat starlight at its own game for an instant. The downside is coordination. If they're not aiming, we're not catching. Waste heat is the workhorse test because physics demands it. Use energy, and you must dump entropy somewhere. A star partially cloaked in collectors, think Dyson swarms, not solid shells, should glow extra in mid-infrared. Infrared sky surveys have cataloged millions of galaxies and stars. Researchers flagged outliers with odd colors that might indicate excess heat. The punchline so far, lots of dusty galaxies.
0 slam dunk megastructures. Dust and star formation mimic the same signatures. Careful follow-up usually says natural. Could efficient civilizations radiate at cooler temperatures and hide in the confusion? Yes. Run close to the cosmic microwave background with giant radiators, and your signal looks like coal dust. Here's the weird part. Even a galaxy-scale civilization might not look bright. If they optimize computation and recycle energy locally, radiators run long and dim. If they prioritize minimal leakage for security, their waste heat becomes hard to separate from background. That shifts the game from spot the neon sign to find the anomaly needle in the cosmic hay. Exoplanet atmospheres are the new frontier. Biosignatures like oxygen-methane imbalance tell you about life. Technosignatures would be industrial fingerprints, chlorofluorocarbons, nitrogen dioxide, strange spectral edges from solar panels, night-side lights, or heat islands that don't match seasons. JWST can sniff a handful of rocky worlds around small stars. Future giant telescopes with coronagraphs or star shades could map dozens to hundreds of Earth-sized planets around sun-like stars. What would count as artificial? A stable, non-natural pollutant at parts per billion levels, or a mirrored spectral edge consistent with photovoltaics spread over continents. We're not there yet, but roadmaps exist. What about probes in our backyard? We've mapped big asteroids and scanned Lagrange points a bit, but not exhaustively. Radar, optical, and infrared surveys miss small, cold objects easily, especially if they're designed to be boring. A 1-meter probe parked in a polar lunar crater, or a dark, slow object in the outer solar system could dodge detection today. That's not proof of visitors. It's a reminder that we looked. Often means we looked where it was easy. Nobody explains this right, but negative results are information. Bayesian logic says, a non-detection reduces the probability of loud, ubiquitous beacons and galaxy-bright waste heat, and it reduces it the most where we're most sensitive. It barely touches scenarios we haven't probed. Intermittent whispers, localized industry, or extreme efficiency. In other words, each survey trims branches. The tree is still big, and decades of nulls constrain 1950s-style beacons. Not quiet, modern.
Strategies. Make it stick with a micro-story. Years ago, a candidate signal from a nearby star lit up the internet. Strong, narrow, right where you'd hope. Teams scrambled, telescopes pivoted, and nothing. Later analysis pointed to a terrestrial source, probably a misidentified reflection. It was disappointing, but useful. It stress-tested our pipelines, improved RFI filtering, and tightened follow-up protocols. The next false alarm will die faster. The next real one, if it comes, will survive. So where does the audit leave us? Radio. No confirmed carriers. Wide but shallow coverage across time. Optical/laser. No verified pulses, limited cadence. Waste heat. No megastructure poster child. Strong constraints on cartoonish Dyson spheres. Weak constraints on efficient swarms. Exoatmospheres. Biosignatures first. Technosignatures pending. Local space, incomplete. The sky's silence, given these slices, says loud and wasteful is rare. It doesn't say nobody's home. The practical implication is focus. Push continuous, wide field monitoring to catch intermittent signals. Expand mid-IR sensitivity and modeling to separate cold radiators from dust. Fund Starshade-class missions to sample Earth analogs for weird chemistry. And standardize open data so false alarms tighten our nets. Non-detections don't end the story. They shape our next moves. The next survey could still flip the script with a single stubborn anomaly that refuses to go away. The scariest discovery, life we can't explain nearby. Non-detections narrow possibilities, but one detection could shove the filter toward our future. The scariest result isn't a radio beacon. It's humble, finding life in our own solar system that didn't come from Earth. If we confirm a second Genesis next door, life is rare collapses, and the remaining filter moves later in the chain, closer to us. Okay, so basically, there are 3 prime suspects: Mars, Europa, and Enceladus. Mars first. It once had rivers, lakes, and possibly a northern ocean. Today, it's cold and dry at the surface, but subsurface brines and protected pores could host microbes. What would count as independent life?
Cells are fossils with biochemistry that doesn't match Earth's. Different genetic bases, different chirality of amino acids, alternate membranes, or a metabolism that uses unfamiliar cofactors. If all we find is Earth-like DNA, we can't be sure. It could be contamination or ancient rock-hopping exchange between worlds via meteorites. Independence hinges on weirdness. Europa is different. Under its ice shell sits a global ocean with more water than Earth, warmed by tidal flexing. Energy plus water equals chemistry, and Jupiter's radiation churns oxidants at the surface that might feed life below if they're transported inward. The smoking gun would be complex organics in plumes with patterns that scream metabolism, certain isotopic ratios, redox couples out of equilibrium, and again, alien biochemistry. If Europa hosts cells with a genetic system unrelated to DNA, RNA, that's a second tree of life. That's the nightmare, in great filter terms. Enceladus gives us the cleanest laboratory. Cassini flew through its geysers and sniffed salty water with organic silica grains, suggesting hydrothermal vents and molecular hydrogen, a potential food source for chemotrophs. That is a pre-packaged origin of life kit: water, energy gradients, minerals, and time. A future mission could fly through again with better mass spectrometry, sequencing attempts for unknown polymers, and chirality checks. If it finds polymers that store information but aren't DNA, RNA, or amino acids with the opposite-handedness in biological ratios, independence becomes hard to deny. Here's what most people miss. Panspermia muddies Mars because rocks can swap between Earth and Mars after big impacts. But Europa and Enceladus are wrapped in miles of ice inside giant gravity wells. Earth microbes don't casually hitch a ride in, survive space and radiation for millennia, re-enter through ice and seed an ocean. Those moons are cleaner tests for did life arise twice in one system? Everything clicked when I traced the probabilities. If life starts independently twice in one solar system, then abiogenesis probably happens a lot on Earth-like worlds. That doesn't force technology to be common, but it wipes out the life almost never starts escape hatch. The filter would likely be later: complex cells, multicellularity, intelligence, or worse, civilizational self-sabotage. The silence would stop being about chemistry and start being about choices and fragility. The paradoxical fear is that a microbial win is bad news for us. Biologists would celebrate, cosmologists would gulp. 2 roots here suggest billions of roots out there. If the sky is still quiet, the gun points to a later choke point. That elevates every risk we discussed in the adolescent window. It says, many worlds light the match, few learn not to burn the table. Make it stick with a
Picture Europa Clipper sampling a plume. The mass spectrometer flags repeating units. Too orderly for geology. The chirality analyzer reports a consistent left-handed bias, but not the same set we use. The onboard team stares at a spectrum no Earth microbe would make. Headlines cheer second Genesis. SETI folks quietly update their priors. The future filter just got heavier. What would this discovery change immediately? Funding priorities swing. Planetary protection becomes stricter. No accidental cross-contamination that could erase the evidence. Astrobiology missions multiply. Cryobots for ice moons. Landers for Mars special regions. Dedicated sample return with ultra-clean handling. Techno-signature searches intensify too, because the updated model predicts many biospheres but still silent skies. We look harder for subtle, efficient civilizations. What if we find life nearby, but it's clearly our cousin, DNA? Same genetic code? That's still big, but it doesn't move the filter much. It would suggest resilience and transfer, not independent origin. The scary lever barely budges. The real swing comes from an alien biochemistry. What if we keep finding nothing? Mars sterile, Europa briny but empty, Enceladus chemical but lifeless. That nudges the filter backward. Abiogenesis might be rare after all. The future looks wider, but the responsibility grows. If we're rare, no galactic safety net exists. Survive, and we might become the noise we expected to hear. Set the stakes. These ice moons aren't just science targets. They're existential coin flips. A single mass spectrum can change how we read the silence and how urgently we treat the century ahead. Weighing the evidence, is the filter behind us or ahead? So which side looks more likely right now? Okay, so basically we've got 2 piles of clues that point in opposite directions. Earth's early life shows up fast, which hints the first spark might be easy. The sky stays quiet, which hints later, steps, or survival, are hard. We need a clean way to hold both ideas without fooling ourselves. That's where a simple Bayesian update helps. Start with a rough prior, then nudge it with each piece of evidence. Begin with Earth's timeline. Life appears quickly after oceans form. That pushes probability mass toward abiogenesis is not crazy hard. But then we hit the long stall. Billions of years of microbial dominance before complex cells. Then a faster ramp to multicellularity. Then an eye blink from language to radio. Those stretches suggest at least one slow, fragile transition in the middle. Eukaryotes, multicellular control, or the cultural ratchet. That nudges us toward some mid-chain step might be rare. Now add the sky. We've scanned for loud beacons and giant heat leaks, and we've come up empty where we're most sensitive. That doesn't kill quiet, efficient civilizations, but it does cut down the chance that lots of them are shouting or burning bright. If even a tiny fraction went big and wasteful, we'd likely have seen one by now. That nudges us toward rare, loud survivors, or rare survivors, period. Here's what most people miss. These nudges interact. If life is common and complex cells sometimes happen, then silence leans harder on later filters. Intelligence that rarely ratchets, or adolescent self-destruction that's frequent, or hard physics, plus caution that keeps survivors dim. If life is rare from the start, the silence needs no tragedy, just chemistry that usually fizzles. The same data support different stories depending on where you weight the chain. Everything clicked when I framed it as 3 competing pictures and asked what would change my mind. Picture A, filter behind us, early. Abiogenesis or the eukaryote merger is nearly impossible. Predictions, biosignatures will be scarce. Independent life nearby will be absent. Technosignatures almost non-existent. What would move me off A? A second genesis in the solar system or widespread biosignatures on exoplanets. Picture B, filter behind us, mid-chain. Multicellularity or the cultural ratchet is rare. Predictions, microbial biosignatures fairly common, complex biospheres uncommon, technosignatures extremely rare but not zero. What would move me off B? Many planets with clear complex biosphere fingerprints, yet still no tech. Then the ratchet looks easy, and the filter slides forward. Picture C, filter ahead. Many worlds reach industry. Most fail the adolescent window or choose quiet strategies under hard physics. Predictions, occasional short-lived technosignatures if we watch long enough. Few or no megastructures, subtle artifacts possible but sparse. What would move me off C? Finding efficient, durable technosignatures, persistent industrial spectra, artificial night-side light curves, or cold waste heat from optimized radiators across multiple systems. Where do we stand today? Our priors should be modest. The early life clue lightly downgrades abiogenesis is impossibly rare. The eukaryote. Weirdness lightly upgrades mid-chain choke point. The quiet sky strongly downgrades many loud survivors. When you stack those, you get a tilt, not a certainty, toward either a mid-chain filter already passed or a future filter that trims most adolescent civilizations. Here's the counterintuitive part. The scariest single discovery, independent life nearby, would mostly demolish the early filter behind us options. If chemistry sparks twice in one system, it probably sparks all over. Then the silence points hard at later attrition. Either minds rarely climb into culture, or cultures burn out, or survivors are so careful and efficient that we barely notice them. Any of those push the peak risk into our century-scale decisions. So how do we act under uncertainty? Robust strategies work across pictures. If the filter is behind us, investing in survival and expansion honors rarity. If the filter is mid-chain, protecting and enriching Earth's biodiversity preserves the raw material and ecological complexity that underwrites intelligence. If the filter is ahead, risk reduction isn't optional. It's the bottleneck. The moves overlap. Build slack into critical systems, strengthen global early warning, align powerful tech before it scales, design institutions that learn without breaking. There's one lever that changes the odds most. Extend our technological dwell time without catastrophe. Every year we keep radios on, avoid tail risk cascades, and improve safety culture. We move probability mass from short-lived flashes towards stable, quiet grown-ups. Longevity itself is evidence. A civilization that stabilizes buys time to explore.
to diversify off-world, to develop cautious propulsion, and to light faint, persistent techno-signatures that future astronomers might finally catch. What about hope? It isn't naive, it's a policy. Quiet skies don't imply doom. They imply that loud is rare and sloppy is punished. The path that remains is careful, iterative, safety-first growth. That's slower than we like and less cinematic than galaxy-spanning empires, but it's compatible with the data we have and the risks we can see. So is the filter behind us or ahead? Today's best honest answer? We have weak evidence for an early or mid-chain difficulty, and stronger evidence that loud, wasteful survivors are rare, leaving a meaningful chance the hardest round is still to come. Plan for that world, act to escape it, and watch the ice moons, because one plume sample could tip the scales overnight. Surviving the adolescent window, practical levers. If the hardest round might be ahead, the job now is simple to say and hard to do. Keep the fuse short and the runway long. Okay, so basically we need to turn fragile, tightly coupled systems into resilient, slack-rich ones, while aligning the scariest technologies before they scale. Think of it as civilizational safety engineering. Start with risk mapping. Not all disasters behave the same. Short-tail risks hit fast and visibly. Nuclear exchange, a lab-acquired infection that spreads, a power grid cascade during a heat wave. Long-tail risks lurk misaligned AI that optimizes the wrong target. Self-replicating tech with a subtle bug, slow ecological tipping points. The trick is correlated failures. If one shock knocks out multiple layers at once, you don't get a crisis. You get a phase change. So we map interdependencies. Which components fail together, which sensors lie together, which leaders decide from the same broken dashboard. Everything clicked when I realized safety is a stack. Hardware, software, people, and institutions each need guards. For nuclear risk, de-alert missiles to add minutes, diversified detection with independent modalities, satellite infrared plus ground radar plus human confirmation, and run red team drills that inject realistic noise so operators practice saying, hold. For biotech, raise safety two ways: containment tiers that match agent risk, and norms that separate research by intent and capability. Add DNA synthesis screening so orders for dangerous sequences flag before shipment. Make anomaly reporting blameless and fast, like aviation's near-miss culture. AI needs its own playbook. Align objectives early and often. Build interpretability tools that show what models attend to so misgeneralizations pop before deployment. Keep gradient access and model weights controlled for frontier systems. Don't put God mode in everything. Use evals. Standardize stress tests for deception, power seeking, biodesign assistance, and gate new capabilities behind passing scores. And crucially, separate experimentation from production. Sandbox powerful models where they can't quietly reach the internet or control actuators. Capability races are real. You cool them with shared audits, compute governance, and stage release. Boring processes that save you from exciting failures. Here's what most people miss. Resilience is not just redundancy, it's decoupling. If every hospital in a region
relies on the same supplier for a critical drug, adding more hospitals doesn't add slack. You want diversity of suppliers, inventories that buffer shocks, and local capacity to pivot. Grid example: overbuild transmission, add storage, and harden substations. Then run black start drills so you can boot the grid from cold. Internet example: multiple undersea cables and satellite backstops. Priority protocols that keep emergency traffic alive when everything else saturates. Early warning systems buy time. Pandemics, wastewater sequencing across cities, syndromic surveillance that looks for weird clusters, and pre-negotiated data sharing that bypasses politics for the first 72 hours. Climate extremes, heat early warnings tied to cooling centers, and dynamic pricing that pre-cools buildings before grid peaks. Geo-risk, better sky surveys for impactors, plus decision frameworks for deflection. These aren't gadgets, they're clocks that stretch decision windows, so humans can correct course before automation locks in bad choices. Global coordination is the hard human part. No world government required. You want networks that behave like standards bodies and safety boards. Aviation safety works because incident reports are shared, black boxes are opened, and lessons generalized. Copy that. Build an international incident repository for frontier tech. Anonymous submissions, forensic teams, public advisories. Add verification capacity. Independent labs that can replicate safety claims, like UL for algorithms in biology. And yes, treaties where they help. test ban-style norms for autonomous weapons that target humans, guardrails on engineered pathogen work, and compute thresholds that trigger third-party oversight. Make it stick with a micro-story. A city ran a tabletop for a heat wave meets blackout. They found their diesel backup shared one supplier, and those tanks were half full. They fixed it. Diversified fuel contracts, added battery microgrids at hospitals, pre-installed reflective roofs, and set up neighborhood cooling hubs with solar plus storage. The next summer set a heat record. The grid still buckled, but the hospitals didn't. Ambulance response held, and mortality fell. That's what civilizational slack looks like. Invisible in normal times, decisive in crunch time. Culture is technology. Norms determine whether warnings are heard, whether whistleblowers are protected, whether labs share protocols or posture. Create prestige for boring wins, safety papers, incident response, code audits. Teach decision makers base rate thinking so they don't overreact to anecdotes or underreact to compounding risks. Reward pre-mortems, teams that write how a project could fail before it starts, and post-mortems that publish what actually failed without performative blame, and build institutions that learn. Sunset clauses for emergency powers, dashboards with public metrics, and budgets that fund maintenance, not just ribbon cuttings. Energy abundance helps everything. Cheap, clean, reliable power buffers crises. It runs desalination during droughts, grows indoor food during crop shocks, and keeps data centers and vaccine freezers cold. Bet on a portfolio. Renewables plus long-duration storage, advanced nuclear with passive safety, upgraded transmission and efficiency. Redundancy and generation plus storage plus demand response turns a fragile grid into a flexible platform. Milestones tell us we're exiting the window. In space, closed-loop life support that runs for years without resupply, routine in-space manufacturing of spare parts, propellant depots and tug networks that make missions modular, and autonomous hazard response on spacecraft. That's safety culture off-world. On Earth, continuous genomic early warning at national scale. Mandatory AI safety evals before deployment in critical sectors. Nuclear arsenals moving to lower alert postures with verified sensors. And annual public red team exercises across finance, energy, health, and cyber. Here's the counterintuitive part. Progress and safety can accelerate together when you separate exploration from exposure. Sandbox boldly, deploy cautiously. Fly prototypes in simulators where they can crash 1,000 times a day. Then gate real-world use behind boring checklists. It feels slow. It compounds fast. In other words, surviving the adolescent window isn't mystery. It's discipline. Map correlated risks, design for decoupling, buy time with sensors and drills, align the high-octane tech, and build a culture that celebrates prevention. Every additional quiet year is evidence we're passing around that silenced the sky. Beyond the filter, what a mature civilization leaves behind. If we pass through, what does life look like on the other side? Okay, so basically, maturity trades spectacle for survivability. A grown-up civilization optimizes locally, expands slowly, and leaves signatures that look like nature unless you know where to squint. Start with quiet expansion. Fast, crude starships are PR. The workhorses are patient probes and automated foundries. You seed nearby systems with machines that mine small bodies, print spare parts, and set up relay nodes. You don't rush. You treat each new system like a long-term lease. Stabilize orbits, chart hazards, inventory volatiles, and set conservative rules for self-repair. The payoff is compounding. A network of reliable outposts linked by narrow-band, authenticated communications. No bright beacons, no empire glow, just a string of well-tuned workshops. Here's what most people miss. Signature priorities flip. Early civilizations leak energy because they're messy. Mature ones manage heat like budget. They run computation close to physical limits, recycle energy, and radiate at wavelengths that blend into the cold sky. Waste heat doesn't vanish, physics won't allow it, but it shifts downward, spread over huge radiators and dust-rich environments where it's indistinguishable from the background. If you're looking for neon, you miss the dim, patient LEDs. Everything clicked when I thought about industrial spectra. Even a cautious civilization changes its local chemistry a little. Think stable, low-level signals, unusual ratios of inert, non-reactive gases that don't match geology alone. Faint, regular modulations in reflected light from surfaces optimized for harvesting energy. Broad edges, consistent with advanced photovoltaics tuned to a star's spectrum. These aren't world-shouting signatures, they're forensic clues you'd only spot by comparing dozens of similar systems and noticing the odd ones out. The counterintuitive part is biology. Mature cultures might prefer engineered biospheres over brute force megastructures. If you want a long-lived, self-repairing, solar-powered infrastructure, life is the best technology we know. You can edit ecosystems to stabilize climate, maintain soil, and perform local manufacturing at ambient temperature. From far away, that looks like a healthy planet with tight nutrient cycles and unusually stable seasonal patterns. You'd call it pristine, not artificial. Kardashev isn't the only ladder. We love the idea of climbing from planetary to stellar to galactic power, but you can grow inward instead of outward. More computation per joule, better error correction, more reversible logic, and smarter allocation of tasks to minimize heat. The civilization becomes denser in thought, not brighter in light. If value lies in simulated worlds, research or art, scaling watts isn't the only or even the best metric. A black box sieve might tuck most activity into shaded regions, asteroid belts, Kuiper-like zones, where cooling is easy and visibility is low. Make it stick with a microstory. A future probe coasts into a nearby system and maps an asteroid family. The size distribution is weirdly smooth. Craters look gardened, as if regolith has been turned over uniformly. Spectra show trace alloys that don't form naturally, but are stable and inert. No radio chatter, no lasers, just rocks that behave like maintained infrastructure. That's a plausible, mature calling card. Maintenance without advertising. Why might they hide? They don't need to. They just optimize. Broadcasting wide wastes energy and invites risks you can't model. Better to authenticate, encrypt, and beam tight to known receivers. Better to keep expansion subliminal and reversible. No runaway replicators. No empire you can't audit. The game theory story we touched earlier lands here. Survival favors, small footprints, short feedback loops, and patience. What will we predict from that? Subtle technosignatures, consistent night-side warmth patterns too regular for weather. Ultra-stable, low-variance albedo and belts engineered for power capture. Long-lived, narrow-band emissions that never repeat without a handshake, so we never see them. Infrared anomalies not at stars but in cold zones, barely above the microwave background. An absence of the cartoonish stuff people expect. Here's the weird part. Silence could be success. A galaxy without wasteful empires might be full of long-lived locals who solved alignment, climate, and coordination, then chose to stay small and safe. They leave traces only where it helps reliability, maintenance signatures, optimized surfaces, quiet relays. That's a hopeful reading of the dark. Not a graveyard, but a neighborhood of introverts. So why does this matter to you right now? Because it reframes our goal. Passing the filter isn't about conquering stars, it's about learning to be boring in the right ways. Precise, redundant, careful, until boring compounds into forever. If we do that, our descendants might leave the same faint fingerprints. Tidy asteroid belts, stable atmospheres, cool radiators humming just above the deep cold. Hard to see from afar, obvious up close. And getting close is the point of surviving. Personal lens. Meaning without neighbors. So why does this matter to you right now? Okay, so basically, the Great Filter isn't a trivia question about aliens. It's a mirror. It asks how you live when answers are delayed and stakes are huge. Two paths help: stoic responsibility and restless curiosity. The stoic version is simple. Rarity raises duty. If intelligent life is thinly scattered, then your choices carry more weight than they feel. Not in a cosmic hero way, more like maintenance. Keep the lab safe, patch the server, vote when it's boring. Mentor the intern. These are tiny gears in a big safety clock. A civilization that survives is one where millions of people do dull, precise things well and on time. The curious version says exploration is a moral act. Curiosity maps the unknown, so fear doesn't fill it. Every telescope campaign, every clean room sample, every preprint that carefully separates signal from noise pushes the probability mass toward clarity. You don't need to work at a space agency to explore. Learn a new domain until you can teach it to a friend. Donate to projects that extend our senses. Join open source efforts that harden the tools others depend on. Curiosity scales, especially when it's shared. Here's what most people miss. Meaning doesn't come from finding neighbors. It comes from making neighbors out of strangers. The same skills we'll need for off-world life. Coordination, reputation, conflict resolution are skills we can practice down the block. If you can't keep a volunteer team on task without drama, you can't run a habitat on Mars. Civic projects are simulators for space. Everything clicked for me after a near miss a researcher told me about. Their lab worked with high-consequence biology. An airflow monitor blipped, then reset. Easy to ignore. Someone filed an anomaly report anyway. The inspection found a failing seal in a duct. Minor, fixable, but the pattern matched two other labs in the building. Maintenance swapped parts building wide. Months later, a regional blackout hit. Those seals would have failed under heat loads. No outbreak happened, nothing happened. That's the point. The win is invisible. The person who filed the report didn't go viral. They went home. The practical version: translate existential risk into daily levers. If you're technical, aim your talent at error bars. Verification, validation, reliability engineering. If you're a policymaker, build institutions that learn. Incident repositories, red team budgets, sunset clauses, and audit trails the public can read. If you're an educator, teach base rate thinking and the habit of running small experiments before big bets. If you're a student, practice 2 skills now: writing clearly enough that a stranger can reproduce your work, and noticing when incentives nudge you towards speed over rigor. Here's the weird part. Hope works like compound interest. You don't need certainty to invest. You need a positive expected value and time in the market. Each avoided catastrophe buys another year for alignment research, for climate resilience, for better detectors in the sky. Each year of calm is a deposit. Over decades, deposits become a buffer thick enough that accidents don't kill us, and bad actors don't get easy wins. Call to agency. Pick a slice of the safety stack and own it. Maybe it's pushing your company to run pre-mortems before launches. Maybe it's advocating for DNA synthesis screening standards. Maybe it's volunteering with a community response team that practices heatwave drills. None of that feels like saving humanity. That's fine. The work that counts rarely feels epic in the moment. Meaning without neighbors is this: act like we're rare enough to matter and common enough to be humble. Rare means care, common means learn. We might be the only voices for light years or one choir in a quiet cathedral. Either way, the score improves when you keep time. Hold your note and listen. The great filter forces a choice. Behave like survival is earned daily, long before we know which step is hardest. If this clicked, subscribe for clear, non-hype deep dives. Watch the next episode on Technosignatures and the silent sky. Share this with one person who thinks, "Where is everybody?" It's just a meme. Appendix. Sources and uncertainties. Quick grounding before we go. Okay, so basically, here's what we know solidly, what's still inference, and where we're speculating, plus how new data would move the needle. What's well supported: exoplanets are common. Kepler and TESS showed that small planets around Sun-like and M-dwarf stars are abundant. A to Earth, the fraction of Sun-like stars with roughly Earth-sized planets in temperate orbits, is not nailed down, but is not near zero. The Milky Way is. Old and even slow expansion could tile it on sub-galactic timescales. Basic diffusion models and colonization wave arguments say that 1% of light speed probes spread across the disk in tens to hundreds of millions of years, short compared to the galaxy's age. Life on Earth appears early. Earliest isotopic and fossil hints push the start of life back to within a few 100 million years after oceans stabilized. This weakly suggests abiogenesis might not be impossibly hard. Complex eukaryotic cells arrive late. The endosymbiosis story, mitochondria from bacterial partners, has strong genomic support. The long microbial era before complex multicellularity is a real timescale fact. SETI non-detections so far are real. Radio, optical pulse searches, and mid-infrared waste heat surveys have turned up no confirmed artificial signals or megastructures, despite substantial, but still limited, search volume. Ice moons with subsurface oceans exist. Europa and Enceladus have strong evidence for global oceans, with energy sources sufficient for interesting chemistry. Cassini's plume data from Enceladus implies hydrothermal activity and molecular hydrogen consistent with hydrothermal vents. What's inference? The great filter framing is a logical response to the Fermi Paradox, not a measured entity. It packages unknown probabilities across steps into a single bottleneck concept. It's useful, but abstract. The cultural ratchet as a threshold rests on comparative cognition and archaeology. We infer that language and population structure allowed cumulative culture to scale. The exact triggers and necessity are debated. Self-destruction risk as a civilizational choke point integrates nuclear history, biotech trajectories, and AI capability curves. We have anecdotes and near misses in nuclear systems. We project similar dynamics onto other techs. That's reason extrapolation, not proof. Hard physics limits on expansion are grounded in energetics and material science, but the strategic dark forest behavior is a game theory hypothesis. It's plausible, it isn't observed. What's speculative? Precise probabilities for abiogenesis, eukaryogenesis, and intelligence emergence. With one known biosphere, we can't assign tight numbers without strong priors. fast appearance on Earth, weekly updates. Not impossibly rare, but selection effects muddy it. Efficiency camouflage civilizations radiating near the cosmic microwave background. Thermodynamically possible, empirically unconfirmed. It offers a way to reconcile silence with survival, but it's still a hypothesis. Self-replicating probes as a dominant expansion mode. Conceptually sound, we haven't built any. Arguments about error accumulation and genetic drift in machines are analogies from biology plus engineering intuition. Distinguishing correlation from causation. Early life on Earth correlates with abiogenesis might be easy, but could also reflect observer selection. We're here because our world got lucky early. That doesn't force a high base rate across planets. The long microbial era correlates with mid-chain steps are slow or rare, but it might also reflect contingent geochemical and environmental histories unique to Earth. Oxygenation timing, nutrient cycles, and plate tectonics. Silent skies correlate with few loud survivors, but also with search bias. Our surveys cover limited time, frequency, and sensitivity. Silence in the slices we've checked doesn't equal silence everywhere. Specific examples and missions that anchor claims. Kepler's planet occurrence rates and TESS's nearby target catalog underpin the planets are common claim. Breakthrough Listen's multi-year radio surveys and re-observations tighten constraints on bright, narrow-band repeaters within certain bands. WISE and subsequent infrared surveys set upper limits on galaxy-scale waste heat. Follow-ups often reclassify candidates as dusty starbursts. JWST's early exoplanet spectra show we can resolve atmospheric chemistry on small worlds around M-dwarfs. Plan LUVOR, HOB-X-like concepts with coronagraphs, star shades aim at Earth analogs. Europa Clipper and JUICE target ice ocean moon chemistry and geophysics. A dedicated Enceladus plume sampler with next-gen mass spectrometers could test for complex organics and chirality at high confidence. Nuclear near misses. Incidents like the 1979 NORAD training tape error, the 1983 Soviet early warning false alarm associated with Stanislav Petrov's decision, the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, misreads at sea. For example, B-59 submarine incident and various radar flight anomalies illustrate cascade risk in high alert systems. These are documented episodes, not apocrypha. Common misconceptions to avoid. The Drake equation is not a prediction machine. It's a bookkeeping tool that exposes your assumptions. Treating it as an oracle creates false precision. The Cambrian explosion wasn't instant. It was a drawn-out diversification built on earlier, quieter innovations. Oxygen. Body plans, developmental toolkits. Kardashev scale isn't a scoreboard. More watts isn't always more advanced. Computation efficiency and information density can grow while external signatures shrink. SETI has not searched everywhere. Vast regions of parameter space, time coverage, modulation types, sky areas, and low-leakage technosignatures remain lightly sampled. A second biosignature equals aliens in the neighborhood. Independent life in the solar system would change probabilities, but it wouldn't prove civilizations are common, only that life arises more than once. Uncertainties in how they could collapse. Abiogenesis probability. An unambiguous second genesis in our system. Alien biochemistry in Europa and Enceladus plumes would strongly depress filter behind us early scenarios and raise the odds of later filters. Eukaryogenesis difficulty. If we find multiple independent complex cell lineages in Earth's deep history or strong evidence that energy constraints are easily solved without a rare merger, the mid-chain filter shrinks. If not, it stays a prime suspect. Technosignature prevalence. A verified, repeating artificial radio or laser signal, especially with Doppler-consistent drift and independent confirmation, would slash the probability that most civilizations are short-lived or ultra-quiet. Conversely, decades more null results with much denser time on target would weigh against frequent broadcasters. Waste heat constraints. A clear, resolved Dyson swarm signature. Mid-IR excess with spatial temporal structure inconsistent with dust would falsify no one goes big and bright. Improved models and telescopes that can separate cold radiators from dust would tighten this. Dark forest behavior. Direct evidence is unlikely. Indirectly, a pattern of encrypted directional links between artificial relays, if ever detected in situ, would support cautious, authenticated communication cultures. Data, inference, theory, quick labels. Data, exoplanet occurrence rates. Early Earth life indicators, ice moon ocean evidence, documented nuclear incidents, SETI non-detections in specific bands and time windows, infrared sky survey catalogs, Inference, colonization timescales versus galaxy age, cultural ratchet as a threshold, risk aggregation during the adolescent window, engineering mortality compounding over interstellar times. Theory, great filter framing, dark forest strategy, extreme efficiency civilizations hugging thermodynamic limits, detailed probability distributions over evolutionary steps. How we would update each section with new discoveries. Scale problem. A robust A-to-Earth near sun-like stars would push expectations of neighbors up. A much lower A-to-Earth would ease the paradox mildly. Abiogenesis. Second genesis nearby shifts the filter forward. Sterile local worlds nudge it backward. Eukaryotes are multicellularity, fossil genomic breakthroughs, revealing multiple independent complex cell origins or easy pathways which shrink the mid-chain filter. Evidence that endosymbiosis was a unique fluke keeps it large. Intelligence/culture. Cross-species discoveries of cumulative, open-ended culture with teaching and syntax-like structure would raise the base rate for technological ignition. Demonstrating population size thresholds empirically would sharpen predictions about when the ratchet stalls. Self-destruction risk. Documented repeated near misses and incident rates trending up with capability would strengthen the adolescent filter case. Global moves that reduce alert levels, standardize safety evals, and show long, calm periods without lucky saves would weaken it. Hard physics limits. Demonstrations of practical high, specific impulse propulsion, long-lived autonomous maintenance, and robust in situ self-repair would soften the engineering mortality constraint. Verified detection of cold, efficient radiators would support the quiet survivor view. Technosignatures. A single, well-vetted anomaly that persists under reobservation would force recalibration across the board. Continued nulls and deeper, longer, broader searches would carve away the loud and frequent space further. Final caveat. We're reasoning under radical uncertainty with one biosphere and partial sky coverage. The honest posture is humility plus iteration. State priors, watch for anomalies, and let new data move us. The goal isn't to win an argument, it's to make our models fragile to evidence and our systems robust to failure. That's how we read the silence without letting it mislead us, and how we act wisely while answers are still inbound.